Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be doing a custom camera helmet build for the winner of the fully loaded camera flying raffle, Michelle Gilbert. Congratulations again, Michelle. Super excited to build out this helmet for you. So the whole idea behind doing the raffle and doing this video was to provide step-by-step instructions on how to build out your own camera helmet from home. It's definitely an overwhelming process and certainly something you don't want to make any major mistakes on along the way. So we have here our blank slate. This is a Cookie Fuel camera helmet with no holes pre-drilled in it. And over here we have both of Michelle's cameras, so a Canon Rebel T6i along with a GoPro 7. And what we're going to try to do is get these mounted side by side here. So I have all of my tools over here, all the components we're going to be installing over here. The specifics of each and the types of tools we're going to be using as we get to that stage in the process. The one thing I am going to recommend is you always wear safety goggles while doing this. So as you're drilling out holes, little flecks of the helmet can get everywhere. Getting those in your eyes is a major bummer, so I definitely recommend these throughout the entire process. So first thing we're going to be installing is the Fuel dual top plate. So this sits right on top of the helmet here and allows you to mount both of your cameras up top. So with that, let's get started. The dual top plate actually comes with a template that you can screw into the helmet itself to make sure you're putting your holes in the right location. That screws into the top two holes right here of the Fuel. So the first thing we're going to need to do is remove this plate right here and disassemble the template from the dual top plate. Now that we've removed the front plate from the Cookie Fuel and taken apart the assembly for the dual flat top, we're going to install the template. The template's going to sit in the same recessed location that the front plate sat, and we're going to use the same nuts and bolts used to hold on the front plate to affix the template to our helmet so it doesn't shift around when we're drilling all our holes in the helmet. One thing you'll notice about the template is the areas where we're supposed to drill are ovals rather than circles. And the reason for that is because of the curve of the helmet itself. So having it be an oval design means we're going to drill in from the side and then we're going to mill it out upwards like this to create a more vertical hole for the dual flat top plate to be installed. When drilling out the holes in your helmet, you're going to want to start by making a pilot hole. And what I mean by that is starting with a much smaller sized drill bit, slowly working your way up to the larger sizes. If you start too big, what can happen is it can get actually caught in the plastic, torque it out of your hand, and cause damage to the helmet itself, which you don't want to do. So like I said, start small, work your way up. You can also get one of these step drill bits, which I'm going to be using today. And this is basically a ton of drill bits combined into one. So you can drill your pilot hole, continually get bigger and bigger holes without actually switching out any of your drill bit heads. So I got my step drill bit here, and what I've done is I've put a piece of gaffer's tape right above the 7/16 mark because that's the size hole we're trying to drill. And that way when I'm drilling, I can visually see when I've reached that size. So what we're going to do is we're going to start kind of at an angle like this and drill our pilot hole, and as it gets bigger and bigger, we're going to slowly start shifting the drill up like this to mill out the hole and make it more vertical. To install the dual top plate, you're going to want to identify the front and back of the plate. These spacers that go in between the plate and the helmet have been designed specifically to match the curvature of the helmet. So if you have it flipped around backwards, it's not going to sit as flush against the helmet. A great way to tell if it's the front or the back is they've actually designed the inserts on the spacers to be two different shapes. The one in the front should be circular and is only going to fit in the front of the plate, and the one on the back has a flat edge and is only going to fit in the back there. So that's a good, easy way to tell what's the front and back, and to ensure that when you install it and screw it in, it's going to sit nice and flush up against the helmet. The next thing we're gonna do is drill a hole for all our indicator lights and switches. There's a few different locations you can do this. It's entirely up to you. You can do one right in the middle back here, one in the middle of the dual flat top plate right here, or you can actually route it underneath here in between the plate and the helmet. The only drawback to that one, it's a very nice clean look, but if you ever have to replace any of your switches or indicator lights, you're actually gonna have to remove the whole dual flat top mount in order to switch those in and out. So for this particular build, we're actually gonna do it right in the middle of the dual flat top plate. That provides a nice clean look and also allows easy access to switch out our cables if any of them break. Before you start drilling, you're gonna wanna mark a center point. It doesn't have to be perfect, just to give you a rough idea of where you want the pilot hole to go. I'm gonna be using the step drill bit again, but of course you don't have to use this if you don't have one. You can always use normal drill bits. Just a reminder though, to start smaller with a pilot hole and then work your way up from there. I'm not actually gonna install the switch or indicator light yet, but before moving on, I'm gonna make sure that I've drilled a hole big enough to fit both the cables at the same time. That way, when I'm ready to install them, I don't have to circle back and make the hole any bigger. So they appear both to fit, so we're ready to move on to the next step. The next component we're gonna be installing is the ring sight. This particular version is removable, and I highly recommend this version for two reasons. One for travel, so you can easily pop it off your helmet and store it in a location so it doesn't get damaged in your luggage. The second reason is if you're ever find yourself doing a skydive where you're not using a camera, you can easily take it off for those times you don't need it. So this comes with three different components. We have the removable articulating ring sight extender arm. This is the part that gets actually connected to the helmet itself. The second piece is the ring sight, and the third is the swivel clamp, which connects those two together. The articulating ring sight extender comes with a drill template sticker we're gonna put directly on the helmet to ensure we're drilling our holes in the right location. First thing you're gonna wanna figure out is which eye you're gonna use for sighting, either your left or right eye. For most people, it's whichever is the most dominant. The second thing we're gonna wanna double check before we put on the sticker or do any drilling is to ensure that we have the right orientation of the template. So once it's installed, we wanna make sure that the pointy part is facing towards the top or the back of the helmet, and the flat part or the side that the extender arm is coming out is facing out the front. I like to install mine pretty parallel to the front top plate of the Cookie Fuel, and you want to give yourself about a ½ inch from the front ridge and from the ridge of the top plate. The closer you get to that, there's a potential for cracking your helmet once you start drilling, which we wouldn't want. I've also found it's much easier to cut out the template to get it nice smooth on the surface there. So we're gonna cut that out, put it on, and then we'll be ready for drilling. One important thing to note for the template is that it's for both the removable and non-removable versions of the articulating ring sight extender. Both the bottom holes are the same for both, but there's two different locations you can drill in the back, one for removable, one for non-removable. So make sure you identify which version you have before you start drilling this back hole here. We want a 5/32 diameter hole in order to install the articulating ring sight extender. But I'm gonna start with a 3/32 diameter drill bit in order to drill a pilot hole, and then from there we'll move up to the 5/32 diameter drill bit. The ring sight extender is installed using nylon screws. And the reason we use nylon screws is so if there's ever an entanglement, the ring sight will actually break completely off of your helmet. So the important thing to note there is that they're fragile and they can break. So when we're installing them, we want to make sure to not over tighten them. What I like to do is I like to get them in each of the holes and then slowly work my way around, tightening them bit by bit until it's fully firm and on the helmet. Now that we have this component installed, we're actually going to move on to the rest of the helmet before we install the remaining parts of the ring sight assembly. The reason for this is we want the helmet fully assembled with our cameras on there so we can actually sight it in when it's time to install it. Next thing we're going to be doing is swapping out and installing the new plates. We're going to be putting a GoPro mount here in the front top plate location. On the left side, we're going to be installing the ProTrack 2 audible window. And on the right side, we're actually going to be drilling a hole in this plate to install the HiPi Alpha from Hypoxic. That way we have a nice internal location for our button to control our Sony cameras. The next thing we're going to be doing is drilling a hole in the center of the right side plate in order to install the HiPi Alpha. Now the HiPi Alpha pretty much perfectly fits in the back of the side plate, and there's not much margin for error there. So we want to get a center point pretty accurate before we start drilling. You can use a tape measure. What I found a bit quicker and easier is to use 2 pieces of tape. So we can line one up this way, and we use these 2 parts right here to gauge the center point. And then put another piece of tape along this way. And that should give us a rough center point. What you can do to check your work is actually put the HiPi Alpha here on top and see if it looks pretty centered before we start drilling. So that looks pretty good, so we're gonna get going. A couple things about this plate. This is a lot more fragile than the helmet itself, so we wanna be pretty delicate when we do our drilling. This is also a piece that I start by making a pilot hole with the drill. And then I'm actually going to use a Dremel from there to make the hole big enough in order for the HiPi Alpha button to fit. When you're done, you're looking for roughly a 1/2 inch diameter hole here in order to install the HiPi Alpha button. So the HiPi Alpha button is actually rubber, so it's a bit malleable, but that also means you can tear it if your hole is too small. So what I like to do is put an edge corner in there and then slowly start rotating it until it pops into place. Before we install the HiPi Alpha, we're going to install the chin cup cutaway system. That way we don't have any cords in the way when we're working with this area of the helmet. The chin cup cutaway system comes with 2 ratchet straps and the chin cup. The cutaway system was designed to fit on the right side, so make sure you install it on that side of the helmet. Before we put on the chin cup, we need to install this little piece of Velcro that holds the cutaway system in place. It slides on here like this, and it's got an adhesive side that we peel off. It's like this. There we go. And then we can just rotate the whole system up like this. We want it kind of sitting at L-shaped orientation, and then we can just stick it in place right there. If there's any excess sticking out, we can just cut that part off. Now that our ratchet straps and our cutaway system are installed, we can install the HiPi Alpha and our Audible. So anything in the side ports here is held in by this thing right here. It's kind of like a rubber band. It just holds everything in place, so make sure you put those back on. For the HiPi Alpha, we're going to want to make sure to install it in this orientation. And when I say that, I mean we have the plug coming out the back side here and the light coming out the front side. We want the plug coming in the back so that we can route it through the helmet and then out the hole right there, so we can plug it into our cameras. The next thing we're going to want to do is tape down all the cords inside our helmet, and that way they stay in place and where you want them when you're using them. So for the HiPi Alpha here, I like to put that on the opposite side of your ring sight, and that way there's no conflicts, just not in the way or anything. So I put it on the left side in this case, and I'm going to just tape it down like this. There you go. And then for our shutter activation switch, we want to route the plug part out the top of the helmet here so we can plug it into our camera. And for the shutter switch itself down here, we want to put that on the opposite side of our cutaway system, and that way if you need to cut away or anything, you're not accidentally pulling on this switch and not being able to cut away. I like to route it out the top above the ratchet strap, and that way when I have all the foam inserts in there and I'm not using it, I can actually tuck it back into the helmet, and it's not dangling around or anything when I'm not using it. So now they're both taped down. For the rest of the excess, you can kind of tape it down. Honestly, it doesn't really matter because it's all going to be held in place by the foam insert padding of the helmet once you put that back in. Now we can put the foam inserts back in the helmet. It does kind of have the right order, so make sure you do it that way or they won't quite fit properly. So this piece you want to put in first. And it does have the Velcro on the back side here, so it's pretty easy to know exactly how far in you want to put it in the helmet. The easiest way I've found to do this is kind of fold everything in half and try to line it up that way. So I'll fold this one in half and stick it right here, kind of in the center, and fold it around like that. Cool, so that piece is in there. The next thing we want to put in is this part right here. So same thing, we're going to want to fold it in half, just like that. And we're going to stick it down right in the center here. Line it up with the Velcro around the sides, just like that. Make sure that all your switches and stuff are still coming out and not buried behind there. Cool, so there we go there. And then this piece fits in the back part of the helmet right there. Again, we'll fold that in half, put that in the back there, just like that. And then the last piece here, this piece right here, should fit in nice and snug, facing this way, just like that. And then make sure you pull this part out a little bit right here. So it should all line up so you shouldn't really be able to see any part of the inside of the helmet once it's installed correctly. So just like that. Now we can put the chin cup on. The chin cup, when you put it on, make sure that when people are looking at you when you're wearing it, they can actually read Cookie, not upside down like this. So we'll put that on there. And then we can install the liquid flat lock mount. Now the base part of the liquid flat lock mount uses this little piece of rubber here and this piece that allows you to take on and off the plate that's holding onto your camera. So make sure that that's on there and correct before you screw it into your helmet. I've done that before where you install it without that little piece of blue rubber in there, and then you have to take it off and do it all over again. So we're gonna put this on the left side of the helmet because that's where she's gonna put her still camera. Just like this. And then it comes with a bunch of screws with thread lock already on there, so make sure to use those ones. Now we get to install the cameras. So originally I had planned to mount a GoPro right here using one of the mounts that comes with the dual flat top plate, and then the Canon Rebel T6i right here on the left side. Unfortunately, what I found with this camera is that the grip itself is actually too large to fit a GoPro right here. They won't fit side by side. So we're gonna have to mount the GoPro up front. No big deal, that's why we have this plate anyway. So all still cameras come with a 1/4 inch thread spot right here, and the flat lock plate comes with 2 of those screws and some washers. So because of the size of this lens, we're gonna wanna make sure to put it as far back on the plate as we can, that way it's not hanging over the front of the helmet. And again, make sure you use a washer, that's gonna get it nice and tight, and make sure that the camera itself doesn't pivot on you when you're in the wind. So we're gonna screw that down like that. You can use the lens to kind of line it up and make sure it's nice and straight on there before you screw it down tight. Or you can use the back right here to just kind of line it up that way. We'll screw that down nice and tight. And then for putting it on the helmet, it goes under the ridge right here and then clips back into this little part right here. That moves in and out. So put it down in the front like that. Cool. And then pull this part back. And then now it's in place. And then we have our shutter switch right here that we're going to route around the front underneath. And then plug it into the side right here. Cool. Just like that. Now there is a fair amount of excess. So what we're going to do is we're gonna take out this center part of the padding right here, and we're just gonna pull in all that excess so there's not much sticking out. Then kind of pile it up in there like that, and there we go. Now we have our still camera installed on the top of our helmet. So there are 2 questions I'd like to address that you might be asking yourself right now. And the first one is, why did we mount this on the left side of the helmet? And so clearly we can see that the shutter switch is exposed here on the left side, which there could be a possible riser strike. That could be bad. It could damage the shutter activation switch over here. But the alternative is having the big grip on the camera exposed on the right side of the helmet. And so when you evaluate both of those things, the conclusion I came to was that I would much rather damage this switch right here and have to replace this relatively inexpensive part than have a big handle hanging out over the right side that could possibly get snagged on a riser or a line through deployment. That's a much worse scenario to me than having to replace this part that's damaged through an opening. So that was the first question. That's why we mounted it on the left side. The second question is, we got a HiPi Alpha installed and we're installing a GoPro. So the winner doesn't have a Sony camera at the moment. But she won that, so we're gonna install it anyway. And so what do we do with the excess and with the plug when we're not using it? And I do this on my current camera helmet right now when I'm not using a Sony camera. And so same with the excess from the shutter switch, we can just tuck the excess away and actually pull the plug itself in underneath here and tuck it underneath the liner of the helmet. So I've pulled it inside there, if you can see, and we're just gonna put the helmet liner back in, and now it's completely out of the way, and whenever she is ready to get a Sony camera, it's available for her use. Here I have the GoPro 7 and the upside down frame from Sheer Concepts. I also have 2 GoPro extender arms and the regular clip that comes with the camera. These extender arms I got off Amazon. They're just generic. If you're looking for some, just look up GoPro extender arms and there are a ton of options out there. So this clips in just like any normal GoPro. And what you're gonna wanna do is kind of line it up and make sure your lenses are pointed in pretty much the same direction. So let's look here. So those are lined up pretty good. And then I also put the screw parts of the extender arms here on the left side or whatever side is opposite to your ring sight. And that way if you need to make any adjustments, you can do so without having to take off your ring sight. The last step to the helmet build process is gonna be cutting off the excess on your ring sight so you don't leave any snag hazards. You're gonna wanna sight it in first, and then from there I'd recommend measuring 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch beyond the swivel clamp attachment point. That'll leave you a little bit of room for adjustment in the future. Before you start doing any sawing and cutting this off, you're gonna wanna disassemble it, so take off the swivel clamp. You're also gonna wanna take off the ring sight itself. Important thing to note about taking off the ring sight is it's a really delicate piece of glass, so make sure you're not tweaking on it on this part where the glass is held. Always grab it from up here and unscrew it there. So what you're left with is 2 pieces of metal like this that you can now saw off the excess on and not ruin any other part of the ring sight assembly. What we're gonna use is a Dremel. That's what I've used in the past and it's worked really well. So I have a circular saw right here. This is used for cutting off padlocks that you lost the key to. It's worked great for me so far. And then I have a carving or engraving tool polisher, metal stone, and this is gonna be used to round out the top of the part where you cut off, and that way you don't leave any sharp edges. Lastly, I definitely recommend goggles for this, as well as a mask. There's gonna be little bits of metal flying around anywhere, and you don't wanna inhale any of that or get any of that in your eyes. Also, make sure to get your helmet and everything else out of the way. You don't wanna get little flecks of metal in the liner or anything like that. That'd be really uncomfortable once you have it on your head. So I took a Sharpie and I drew a line all the way around it where I wanna cut at the right distance. And then just make sure to clamp it down really nice and snug so that it doesn't shift around while you're using your Dremel tool. Now that we've cut off the excess, we're just gonna wanna grind down the edges a little bit so they're not too sharp. Once you've cut off the excess to the desired length, you can reassemble using the swivel clamp and then screw the optics back on. Throw that on your helmet and then make sure that it swivels properly. If you don't cut it down far enough, you can actually run into the helmet as you're swiveling it out of the way. So it swivels good that way and swivels good that way. For this configuration, we have a GoPro in the front, so we're gonna wanna put that on there. And what that means is that we're gonna have to swivel it out this way. So just make sure that it's good and we can swivel it out of the way there. It doesn't run into the GoPro or the helmet. And then the last step we're gonna wanna do is put on our still camera and make sure to sight it in again using our still camera, and then it should be ready to jump.